is Olivia Reed, and I've spent my entire life hiding, not in closets or under beds, but beneath the layers of clothing, behind carefully applied makeup, and within the safety of my own silence. The scars that mark my body tell a story I've never had the courage to share, a reminder of the night that divided my life into before and after. Before the fire, after the pain. I was 17 when it happened, a senior in high school with dreams as vast as the Montana sky. I wanted to dance professionally, to feel the stage beneath my feet and the spotlight on my face. I was good. Everyone said so. Good enough for Juilliard. My dance instructor had whispered during my last lesson. But dreams burn quickly when doused in gasoline. The fire started in the kitchen, an electrical fault that sent flames racing through our old farmhouse. I woke to smoke and heat, my bedroom already an inferno. I remember screaming for my parents, for my little brother, but the roar of the fire drowned out everything. I don't remember much after that, just fragments, the searing pain as flames licked at my skin, the crash of a window breaking, strong arms pulling me from the blaze, and then darkness. When I woke in the hospital 3 days later, I learned that I was the only survivor. My family was gone, and so was the girl I used to be. 40% of my body covered in 2nd and 3rd degree burns. The doctor said, my right leg so damaged that dancing would never again be possible. My face, well, mirrors became my enemy. That was 5 years ago. 5 years of surgeries and skin grafts, of physical therapy and pain management. 5 years of learning to live with a body that felt like a stranger's, and a heart so broken I wasn't sure it would ever beat properly again. I moved to Seattle after my last surgery, seeking anonymity in a city where rain fell like tears. No one knew me here. No one looked at me with pity in their eyes, remembering the girl I used to be. I was just another face in the crowd, albeit one that people's gazes slid away from after the first startled glance. I found a job at a small bookstore tucked between a coffee shop and a vintage clothing store. The owner, an elderly woman named Margaret, hired me without hesitation, her kind eyes seeing beyond the scars to the person beneath. The bookstore became my sanctuary, the smell of paper and ink a comfort on even the darkest days. And there were many dark days. Days when getting out of bed felt impossible, when the weight of grief and loss pressed down on my chest until I could barely breathe. Days when I would catch a glimpse of my reflection and not recognize the person staring back at me. But there were good days too. Days when a customer would recommend a book that would transport me to another world, where I could forget about my scars for a little while. Days when Margaret would make me tea and tell me stories about her youth, about falling in love and having her heart broken and finding herself again. It was on one of these good days that he walked into the store. I was shelving new arrivals, standing on a stepladder to reach the top shelf. The bell above the door chimed, and I glanced over my shoulder to see a man enter, shaking raindrops from his dark hair. "Be with you in just a moment," I called, turning back to the task at hand. "No rush," he replied, his voice deep and warm. "I'm just browsing." I finished shelving the books and climbed down from the ladder, adjusting my scarf to ensure it covered the worst of the scars on my neck. It was a habitual gesture, one I performed countless times a day without even thinking. When I turned around, the man was standing in the poetry section, his back to me. He was tall, with broad shoulders beneath a gray sweater. Something about the way he stood, head tilted slightly as he read, made my heart flutter in a way it hadn't in years. I busied myself at the counter, pretending to organize receipts while secretly watching him. He moved with a slight limp, I noticed, favoring his left leg. But there was a grace to his movements despite this, a quiet confidence that I envied. After a few minutes, he approached the counter with 2 books in hand. I kept my head down, letting my hair fall forward to shield my face. Another habit born of self-consciousness. "Find everything okay?" I asked, the standard retail question slipping out automatically. "Yes, thank you," he said. "Your poetry section is impressive for such a small store." I looked up then, heading his eyes for the first time. They were startlingly blue, like the sky on a clear day, and they didn't flinch or look away when they saw my face. Instead, they crinkled slightly at the corners, a smile forming on his lips. "And Margaret, the owner, she loves poetry," I explained, scanning his purchases. "Says it's food for the soul." "Smart woman," he replied. "I'm Ethan. By the way, Olivia," I said, surprised at how easily my name fell from my lips. I usually try to avoid introducing myself to customers, preferring to remain anonymous. "Nice to meet you, Olivia," Ethan said, and the way he said my name made it sound like something precious. "Do you have any recommendations? I've been trying to expand my reading horizons." I hesitated, not used to customers asking for my opinion. "What do you usually read?" "Mostly non-fiction, history, biography, the real stuff," he said with a small laugh. But I figured it's time to give fiction a chance. I found myself smiling, a rare occurrence these days. "Well, that depends on what kind of stories you like. Adventure? Mystery? Romance?" "Surprise me," he challenged, leaning against the counter. I considered for a moment, then moved to a shelf behind the counter. "This one," I said, pulling out a well-worn copy of The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. "It's magical and beautiful and unlike anything you've probably read before." Ethan took the book, his fingers brushing against mine. The touch sent a jolt through me, unfamiliar and exhilarating. "I'll take it," he said, adding it to his pile. "On one condition." I raised an eyebrow, suddenly wary. "What's that?" "That you let me come back and tell you what I thought of it," he said, his blue eyes twinkling. "Maybe over coffee? There's a great place next door." My heart stuttered. Was he asking me out? Me, with my scars and my brokenness? It had to be pity, or worse, some kind of cruel joke. I don't think that's a good idea," I stammered, suddenly very interested in the cash register. "Why not?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Is it the limp? I promise I won't slow you down too much." I looked up, startled by his assumption. He thought I was rejecting him because of his disability? The irony might have been funny if it wasn't so sad. "No, of course not," I said quickly. "It's just, I don't date." It was simpler than the truth. Ethan studied me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Okay," he said finally. "Not a date, then. Just 2 people discussing a book. No pressure." I should have said no, should have maintained the careful distance I kept between myself and the rest of the world. But something in his eyes, a warmth, an understanding, made me nod. "All right," I agreed, surprising myself, but just to talk about the book. His smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "I'll hold you to that," he said, gathering his purchases. "See you soon, Olivia." After he left, I stood frozen behind the counter, wondering what I had just agreed to. I hadn't been on anything resembling a date since before the fire. The thought of sitting across from someone, being seen, Being judged made my stomach twist with anxiety. That there had been something about Ethan, something in the way he looked at me without flinching, the way he seemed to see beyond the scars to the person underneath. It had been so long since anyone had really seen me. When Margaret returned from her lunch break, she took one look at my face and knew something had happened. "Spill it," she demanded, her hands on her hips. "You've got that look." "What look?" I asked, feigning innocence. "The one that says you've met someone interesting," she replied, her eyes twinkling. "Was it that handsome fellow with the limp?" I passed him on my way in. He was smiling like he'd won the lottery. I couldn't help but laugh at her perceptiveness. "It's nothing," I insisted. "He bought some books. We talked. That's all." Margaret hummed, clearly not believing me. "And I suppose that's why you're blushing." I touched my cheeks, surprised to find them warm. I hadn't blushed in years, hadn't thought I still could. "He asked me to coffee," I admitted quietly, "to discuss a book I recommended." Margaret's face softened, her expression a mixture of joy and concern. She knew my story, knew how I had withdrawn from the world after the fire. "And what did you say?" I said yes, I whispered, still not quite believing it myself. "I don't know why. It's not like anything can come of it." "Why not?" Margaret asked, her voice gentle but challenging. "Because of your scars, Olivia. My dear, we all have scars. Some are just more visible than others." I shook my head, tears pricking at my eyes. "You don't understand. I'm damaged. Broken. Who could possibly want that?" Margaret took my hands in hers, her skin paper thin but her grip surprisingly strong. "Someone who sees beyond the surface," she said firmly. "Someone who understands that it's our breaks and our mends that make us beautiful. Like kintsugi, do you know it? The Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. The philosophy behind it is that the piece is more beautiful for having been broken." I'd heard of it, of course, but had never applied the concept to myself. Could my scars, the physical manifestation of the worst day of my life, actually be something beautiful? It seemed impossible. "Just coffee," Margaret said, squeezing my hands before releasing them. "That's all it needs to be for now. But don't close yourself off to possibilities. My dear, life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." The next week passed in a blur of anticipation and dread. Every time the bell above the door chimed, my heart would leap into my throat, only to sink again when it wasn't Ethan. By the time Friday rolled around, I had convinced myself he wasn't coming back, that he had changed his mind or forgotten all about me. And then, there he was. The bell chimed, and I looked up from the book I was reading to see Ethan standing in the doorway, the night circus clutched in his hand, a smile lighting up his face. "You were right," he said by way of greeting, approaching the counter. It was unlike anything I've ever read before. I couldn't put it down. A warm glow of satisfaction spread through me. There was something deeply gratifying about introducing someone to a beloved book and having them love it too. "I'm glad you enjoyed it," I said, marking my place and setting my own book aside. "Enjoyed it?" "I devoured it," Ethan enthused. The imagery, the characters, the whole concept of the circus. It was magnificent. He leaned against the counter, his eyes bright with excitement. "So, about that coffee, I'm dying to discuss the ending with someone who understands." I hesitated, my old fears resurging, but the genuine enthusiasm in his expression, the way he was looking at me not with pity or disgust, but with real interest, gave me courage. "Let me just tell Margaret I'm taking my break," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Margaret, of course. practically pushed me out the door, telling me to take as long as I needed. The knowing smile on her face made me blush again, a sensation I was still getting used to. The coffee shop next door was warm and inviting, the scent of freshly ground beans and baked goods filling the air. We found a table in the corner, away from the windows and the curious gazes of passers-by. I ordered a chai latte, Ethan a black coffee, and then we were alone, facing each other across a small wooden table. So he began, opening the book to a dog-eared page, the relationship between Marco and Celia. Did you interpret it as fate or choice? And just like that, we were deep in conversation. I found myself relaxing as we discussed the book, my passion for the story overriding my self-consciousness. Ethan was insightful and thoughtful, picking up on nuances I had missed in my own readings. He made me laugh with his impressions of certain characters, and I found myself sharing interpretations I had never voiced aloud before. Before I knew it, an hour had passed. My latte was long gone, and Margaret would surely be wondering where I was. But I was reluctant to end this unexpected connection, this moment of normalcy in a life that had been anything but normal for so long. I should get back to work, I said reluctantly, gathering my things. Of course, Ethan said, standing as I did. Thank you for this. It's been really nice. There was a sincerity in his voice that caught me off guard. He genuinely seemed to have enjoyed my company, scars and all. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. Maybe we could do it again sometime, he suggested, his expression hopeful. I could use another recommendation. You clearly have good taste. I should have said no, should have retreated back into my safe, solitary existence. But the memory of Margaret's words echoed in my mind. Don't close yourself off to possibilities. I'd like that, I said softly, surprised to find that I meant it. Ethan's smile was radiant. Great, he said. It's a date. I mean, not a date. Just you know what I mean. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly flustered. I couldn't help but laugh at his awkwardness. It was endearing, and it made me feel less self-conscious about my own nervousness. I know what you mean, I assured him. And yes, I'd be happy to give you another recommendation. As we walked back to the bookstore, Ethan limping slightly beside me, I felt a flutter of something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate kind that had sustained me through surgeries and recovery, but a gentle, warm hope that perhaps, just perhaps, there might be more to my life than hiding and surviving. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a regular at the bookstore. He would come in, browse for a while, and then we would go next door for coffee and passionate discussions about whatever book he had just finished. I recommended titles across genres from classic literature to contemporary thrillers, from science fiction to historical romance. Ethan devoured them all with equal enthusiasm, his insights always surprising and thought-provoking. Gradually, our conversations expanded beyond books. I learned that Ethan was a physical therapist, specializing in helping patients recover from traumatic injuries. His own limp was the result of a car accident in college, an experience that had inspired his career choice. I wanted to help people find their way back to themselves after everything changed, he explained during one of our coffee meetings. To show them that different doesn't mean lesser. I nodded, understanding all too well what he meant. It's hard, I said quietly, surprising myself with my candor. When your body betrays you, when you can't do the things that used to define you. Ethan's eyes were soft with empathy. What defined you, Olivia, before? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I had never told him about the fire, about my scars, though surely he had noticed them. It was impossible not to. But he had never asked, never stared, never made me feel like I needed to explain myself. Dancing, I said finally, the word feeling strange on my tongue after so long. I was a dancer. Ethan nodded, as if this made perfect sense. I can see that, he said, in the way you move. Even now, there's a grace to it. I looked away, tears threatening. No one had spoken of me and grace in the same sentence since the fire. Not anymore, I whispered. That part of me died a long time ago. Did it? Ethan asked gently. Or is it just waiting for you to find it again? I shook my head, unwilling to entertain such a painful hope. Some things can't be recovered, I said, my voice firm. Some losses are permanent. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. I understand loss, he said finally. After my accident, I thought my life was over. I had been a runner track and cross country. It was everything to me, and suddenly, I couldn't even walk without pain. He looked up, meeting my gaze, but I found new ways to move, new ways to feel alive in my body. Different doesn't mean lesser, Olivia. It just means assurant. His words struck a chord deep within me, resonating with a truth I had been avoiding. I had been so focused on what I had lost, my family, my dreams, my unblemished skin, that I hadn't considered what might still be possible. I haven't danced in 5 years, I admitted, the confession feeling like a stone lifted from my chest. Not since the fire. There it was, the truth I had been hiding. The fast, the event that had reshaped my life, my body, my very identity. Ethan's expression didn't change. No pity or horror crossing his features. He simply nodded, acknowledging my words with the respect they deserved. Would you like to dance again? He asked. The question so unexpected that I laughed in surprise. I don't know, I said honestly. I haven't let myself want things in a long time. It's safer that way. Safer, maybe, Ethan agreed. But is it living? The question haunted me for days afterward. Was I living? Or merely existing? Had I allowed my scars, both physical and emotional, to define me so completely that I had forgotten who I was beneath them? The next time Ethan came to the bookstore, he brought me a gift. A small, exquisitely crafted bowl, broken and repaired with gold lacquer in the kintsugi tradition. I remembered what you said about kintsugi, he explained, placing the bowl in my hands. About how the broken places become the most beautiful parts. I thought, oh well, I thought you might like a reminder. I stared at the bowl, at the golden seams that held the pieces together, making it stronger and more beautiful than before. Tears filled my eyes, but for once, they weren't tears of grief or pain. Thank you, I whispered, cradling the bowl as if it were made of the most precious material on earth. In a way, it was made of hope. That night, alone in my apartment, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I put on music, not just any music, but the piece I had been choreographing for my Juilliard audition before the fire. Debussy's Clair de Lune, hauntingly beautiful and achingly familiar. At first, I just stood there, letting the notes wash over me like water. Then, slowly, I began to move. Not the precise, technical movements of my past, but something new, something that acknowledged the limitations of my scarred body while still finding beauty in motion. I danced in my living room, tears streaming down my face, my body remembering what my mind had tried to forget. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good, by my old standards. But it was mine, this moment, this movement, this reclaiming of a part of myself I had thought was lost forever. When the music ended, I stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, my heart pounding with exertion and emotion. I felt alive, more alive than I had in years. The next day, I told Ethan about my dance. We were walking in a nearby park, a new addition to our routine. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath our feet as we followed the winding path. It felt like coming home to myself, I explained, struggling to find the right words, like finding a piece I thought was gone forever. Ethan's smile was warm, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'm so glad, Olivia," he said, "so incredibly glad." We walked in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the path. Then Ethan stopped, turning to face me. There was a nervousness in his expression that I hadn't seen before. "Olivia," he began, his voice serious, "I need to tell you something." My heart stuttered, fear immediately rising. This was it, the moment when he would tell me that our friendship had run its course, that he had enjoyed our time together but was ready to move on. I braced myself for the rejection I had been expecting since the day we met. "I like you," he said simply, "not just as a friend. Kapia, apaka siritanya sata salase, maaf, sirita beneath the scars bana salase, saya akan melanjutkan siritada tada 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 tadiat." "I like you," he said simply, "not just as a friend. Though I do value our friendship enormously. I like you in a way that makes me think about you when we're not together. That makes me look forward to seeing you more than anything else in my day." I stood frozen, unable to process his words. This wasn't rejection, it was the opposite. And somehow, that was even more terrifying. "You distimatan. You can't," I stammered, taking a step back. "You don't even know me." "Not really." "I know enough," Ethan said gently. "I know you're kind and thoughtful. I know you have an incredible mind and excellent taste in books. I know you've been through something terrible, and instead of letting it destroy you, you've found a way to keep going. That takes extraordinary courage." I shook my head, tears threatening. "You don't understand," I insisted. I'm not the person I used to be." "None of us are," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "We're all changing, all the time, growing, healing, becoming again. I don't want the person you used to be, Olivia. I want the person you are now, scars and all." His words hit me like a physical force, knocking the breath from my lungs. How long had it been since someone had wanted me, not out of pity or obligation, but genuinely wanted my company, my thoughts, myself? "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been hiding for so long. I don't know how to be seen anymore." Ethan took a step closer, closing the distance I had created. "Then we'll figure it out together," he said, slowly. "No pressure. Just give us a chance, Olivia. That's all I'm asking." I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of insincerity or pity, but all I saw was warmth, honesty, and something that looked remarkably like affection. "Okay," I said finally, the word feeling both terrifying and right. "A chance." Ethan's smile was like sunrise, slow and radiant. "That's all I'm asking," he repeated, his voice soft with promise. We continued our walk, the air between us charged with possibility. Ethan didn't try to hold my hand or touch me, respecting the boundaries I had maintained for so long. But there was a new awareness between us, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing beneath the surface of our friendship. In the days that followed, our relationship shifted subtly. Coffee discussions about books became dinner at a quiet restaurant. Walks in the park became visits to museums and art galleries. Ethan introduced me to his world gradually, always mindful of my comfort, never pushing me beyond what I was ready for. And slowly, I began to emerge from the protective shell I had built around myself. I found myself laughing more, speaking more freely, even dressing differently, still modest, still covering the worst of my scars, but with more color, more personality. Margaret noticed the change, her knowing smiles and gentle teasing, a constant reminder of how far I had come. "You're blooming," she told me one afternoon, watching as I arranged a new display of romance novels, "like a flower that's been waiting for the right season." I blushed, still not entirely comfortable with attention. "It's nothing," I demurred. "I'm just trying things." "It's not nothing," Margaret insisted, her wise eyes seeing more than I wanted to admit. It's life, my dear, and it looks beautiful on you." One evening, about 2 months after our walk in the park, Ethan invited me to his apartment for dinner. "I'll cook," he promised, a twinkle in his eye. "Fair warning, I'm no chef, but I make a mean spaghetti carbonara." The invitation felt significant, a new level of intimacy in our carefully evolving relationship. His apartment was his private space, just as mine was a sanctuary I had rarely invited others into. The thought of crossing that threshold made my heart race with both anticipation and fear. "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself with my certainty. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," he replied, his smile warming me from the inside out. "That's all I want." Ethan's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and large windows. It was surprisingly spacious, filled with books and plants and comfortable furniture. It felt lived in and welcoming, much like Ethan himself. "Make yourself at home," he said, taking my coat. "Dinner's almost ready." I wandered around the living room, taking in the details of Ethan's life. Photos on the wall showed him with an older couple who must be his parents, and a young woman who shared his smile, a sister. There were books everywhere, many of them titles I had recommended, and a collection of vinyl records that spoke to eclectic musical tastes. But what caught my eye was a small table near the window, covered in pieces of broken pottery in various stages of repair. Golden lacquer gleamed under a desk lamp, the kintsugi technique I had admired brought to life by Ethan's hands. "You do this yourself?" I asked, amazed, as he emerged from the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine. He nodded, a hint of shyness in his expression. "It's a hobby I picked up after my accident," he explained. "There's something therapeutic about taking something broken and making it beautiful again." It reminded me that I wasn't defined by my injury, that there could be beauty in the healing. I touched one of the completed pieces, a small cup with golden seams running like rivers across its surface. "It's beautiful," I murmured, understanding now why the kintsugi bowl he had given me felt so personal. It wasn't just a gift, it was a piece of himself, a sharing of his own journey of healing. Dinner was delicious, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine. We talked about books and movies, about Margaret and the bookstore, about Ethan's patience and their remarkable resilience. It felt comfortable, natural, as if we had been sharing meals like this for years. After dinner, we moved to the couch, the city lights twinkling beyond the large windows. Ethan put on a record, soft jazz that filled the apartment with warm, mellow notes. We sat close, but not touching, the space between us charged with unspoken feelings. "Thank you for coming tonight," Ethan said, his voice soft in the dimly lit room, "for trusting me enough to be here." I looked at him, really looked at him, the kind eyes that had never flinched from my scars, the gentle hands that repaired broken things with gold, the heart that had somehow seen beyond my damaged exterior to the person hiding beneath. "I think I'm ready," I said, the words coming from some deep, brave place inside me. Ready for what? He asked, his expression curious. To show you, I replied, my heart pounding. All of me, the parts I've been hiding. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a gentleness that made my throat tight with emotion. Olivia, he said softly, you don't have to. I want to, I interrupted, surprising myself with my certainty. I need to know. I need to see if you still feel the same way when you see all of me. Ethan nodded, respecting my decision. Whatever you're comfortable with, he said, but know that nothing you show me will change how I feel about you. With trembling fingers, I unwound the scarf I always wore to cover the scars on my neck and chest. The fabric fell away, revealing the mottled skin beneath, pink and white and unnaturally smooth in some places, puckered and rough in others. I didn't stop there. I rolled up my sleeves, showing the scars that ran from my wrists to my elbows, evidence of where the flames had licked at my arms as I tried to shield my face. Ethan's expression didn't change, no disgust, no pity, just the same warm regard he had always shown me. May I? He asked, his hand hovering near mine. I nodded, holding my breath as his fingers gently traced the path of a scar on my forearm. His touch was light, respectful, almost reverent. You're beautiful, Olivia, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Every part of you. These scars, they're proof of your strength, your survival. How could I see them as anything but remarkable? Tears filled my eyes, spilling over before I could stop them. For so long, I had seen my scars as marks of loss, of failure, of a life irrevocably damaged. But through Ethan's eyes, they became something else, symbols of endurance, of a journey through fire into a new life. And there's more, I whispered, my voice shaking. My leg, it's why I can't dance like I used to. The scarring is extensive, and I lost some mobility. Show me, Ethan encouraged gently, if you want here. I hesitated, then slowly rolled up the right leg of my pants, revealing the worst of my scars, the place where the fire had burned deepest, where skin grafts and surgeries had saved the limb but left it permanently altered. Ethan looked at my leg, then back at my face. Thank you, he said, his voice solemn, for trusting me with this, for letting me see you, all of you. And, I prompted, needing to hear the word. What do you think? He reached out, cupping my face with gentle hands. I think you're the most beautiful person I've ever known, he said, his eyes never leaving mine, inside and out. I think your scars are part of your story, but they don't define you. I think I'm falling in love with you, Olivia Reed. The words hung in the air between us, a declaration that couldn't be taken back. I should have been terrified. I should have run, retreated back into my safe, solitary existence. But instead, I felt a warmth spreading through me, a certainty that had been growing since the day Ethan walked into the bookstore. I think I'm falling in love with you too, I whispered, the truth of it resonating in my bones. Ethan's smile was radiant. Slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was gentle, questioning, a beginning rather than a demand. I kissed him back, my heart soaring with a joy I had thought I would never feel again. When we parted, Ethan rested his forehead against mine, his breath warm on my skin. We'll take it slow, he promised. As slow as you need. There's no rush. Olivia, we have all the time in the world. In that moment, I believed him. For the first time since the fire, I looked toward the future with hope instead of dread. I saw possibilities where before there had only been limitations. I saw a life beyond survival, a life filled with books and conversation, with music and movement, with love and laughter and the golden light of healing. The journey wouldn't be easy. I knew that there would be days when the scars, both physical and emotional, would feel too heavy to bear. Days when the memories of what I had lost would threaten to overwhelm what I had found. But I wouldn't be facing those days alone anymore. As Ethan held me close, the soft jazz still playing in the background, I thought of the kintsugi bowl he had given me, broken, repaired, and made more beautiful by its golden seams. Perhaps that was what was happening to me, to us. Perhaps we were being repaired together, our broken places filled with gold, creating something new and precious from what had been shattered. "Dance with me," Ethan asked suddenly, standing and offering his hand. I hesitated, uncertainty flickering. "I told you, I can't dance like I used to. So we'll find a new way to dance," he said simply. Together. And so, in the soft light of Ethan's apartment, with the city glittering beyond the windows and music flowing around us like water, we danced, not the precise, technical movements of my past, but something new, something that acknowledged our limitations while celebrating what was still possible. Ethan's limp and my scarred leg created a rhythm all our own, imperfect but authentic. As we swayed together, I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling for the first time in years that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Beneath my scars, beneath Ethan's, we had found something rare and precious, a second chance, a new beginning. A love that saw beyond the surface to the beauty beneath. And in that moment, I made a new promise, not to hide, not merely survive, but to live fully, scars and all, to dance, even when the steps were unfamiliar, to love, even when it felt frightening, to allow myself to be repaired with gold, becoming stronger and more beautiful at the broken places. Because some things can't be hidden forever, and some things, I was learning, shouldn't be hidden at all. If Olivia's journey of healing and rediscovery touched your heart, please share this story with someone who might be carrying their own invisible scars. Your support, through likes, comments, and subscriptions, helps us continue creating these emotional journeys that remind us all that our broken places, when filled with gold, can become our most beautiful features. Join our storytelling family as we explore the courage it takes to be seen, scars and